Hello friends, this is Love and you are watching my channel. In this video, I will be talking you on the part 3 of the chronic kidney disease. We have already discussed many things about stage 4 in the previous video. Now we will talk about the remaining thing in stage 4 and about the stage 5. So first of all, I will tell you about abnormal hemostasis. So the hemostasis is actually become abnormal in case of the later stage of CKD. The patient will have the prolonged bleeding time. They will have the decreased activity of the platelet factor 3. There will be abnormal platelet aggregation and adhesiveness, and there will be impaired prothrombin consumption. You can easily know that these all things are indicating that the patient will have increased bleeding tendency. So these all things implies there will be increased bleeding tendency. So that's why the patient will clinically come as there will be the GI bleeding, there can be the GI bleeding, and the GI bleeding will be spontaneous. It means that there is no any stimulus required to occur GI bleeding. It will be spontaneous. So there is spontaneous GI bleeding. Another thing that the there will be bleeding for a long time on any incision. So let's suppose if the patient of CKD has some incision in his hand or leg, then there will be bleeding, but the bleeding will stop after a very long time. It is due to the fact that the clotting tendency is somehow decreased, as there is a platelet factor 3 activity is decreased, and the platelet is actually not adhering to each other in a good way. As you can see, there is a abnormal platelet aggregation, and you can see that there is a impaired prothrombin consumption. That is why the prothrombin also doesn't work good, and due to which there is a bleeding tendency, and due to this bleeding tendency there can be spontaneous GI bleeding, there can be the bleeding for a long time if any incision occurs either in any place of the body. But in some patient, the scenario is different. Some patient, you see, most of patient in stage 4 and 5 are basically having bleeding tendency. It means that they will bleed easily, and the bleeding will occur for a long time. But in some patient with nephrotic range proteinuria, some patient will have the nephrotic range proteinuria. It means there is a large amount of proteinuria resulting in the hypoalbuminemia, resulting in the albumin concentration low in the blood, that is known as hypoalbuminemia, and this all will lead to the thrombophilic disorder. So this thrombophilic disorder, it indicates that now such type of person will be more prone for formation of thrombus or clot at different sites. So prone to clot formation, or we can say the thrombus formation. So you can see that most of the patient will have bleeding tendency, but in some patient where there is a presence of nephrotic range proteinuria will have the hypoalbuminemia. It means that there will be decreased albumin, as the albumin is excreting in the urine, and there will be in the urine there will be loss of anticoagulant factor. In urine there will be loss of anticoagulant factors, and as the anticoagulant factors are lost, the person will be more prone to form the clot or thrombus in the body, and such patient will have greater susceptibility to thromboembolic disease and may have the pulmonary vein thrombosis, pulmonary thromboembolism. So this type of condition can be seen in some patients of CKD where the nephrotic range proteinuria dominates. Usually after the stage 3, the neuromuscular abnormalities also start to appear in the patient of CKD. So CKD patients will have the abnormalities in the CNS, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system and muscles. So every nervous system is basically affected by the chronic kidney disease, and I will talk about the so what are the defects in the particular CNS, PNS, ANS and muscle. I will talk later, but you have to know that these neuromuscular abnormalities are basically due to the retained nitrogenous metabolites as well as parathormone and middle molecules. So there are some molecules known as middle molecules. So basically these middle molecules, parathormone and the retained nitrogenous metabolites, they all actually causes the defect in these neuromuscular structures. So the clinical manifestation become evident at the stage of 3. Usually at the stage of 3, the early CNS manifestation occur, which involve the mild disturbance in the memory, concentration and the sleep. So there will be mild type of disturbance in the memory, concentration and sleep. In stage 4, and we can also say in stage 5, there will be the neuromuscular irritability. There will be neuromuscular irritability, and it means that the neuromuscular junction is basically irritated, irritability, and due to which the patient will have the hiccups. There will be fasciculation and muscle twitching. And in the later stage, when the kidney failure is totally occur, in the stage 5, there can be X-6. X-6 means a kind of tremor that is involuntary. So involuntary tremor can occur. The patient can go into coma. There can be the myoclonus and there can be the seizure. So these things can happen in the very later stages of CKD. And so I have talked about the CNS manifestation, and this was actually the neuromuscular irritability, and this is actually the late CNS manifestation. The peripheral neuropathy becomes evident at the stage 4, and in the peripheral neuropathy, basically the sensory nerves are more involved than the motor. So initially the sensory nerves are involved more than the motor, and initially the lower extremities are involved more than the upper, and initially the distal parts are more involved than the proximal part. So what does that mean? So sensory motor are first involved than the motor. This thing I think there is no worry in knowing this thing. Lower extremities means the legs are affected first. So legs are affected first, and in legs also the distal parts are more affected. Yani ki the distal parts, these distal parts of the leg are basically affected. So the patient will have the discomfort or weakness type of sensation in the distal parts of the leg initially, and there happens a syndrome known as restless leg syndrome. So there is a syndrome known as restless leg syndrome. So let's start to discuss what is restless leg syndrome. So what is restless leg syndrome? So restless leg syndrome is a syndrome that is characterized by the pulling sensation, like something is creeping, like some worm is creeping in your legs, or a kind of discomfort sensation or a pulling sensation that someone is actually pulling your leg muscles. That kind of sensation usually occur in the leg, and usually this happens when the person is at rest, or during the night at the sleep time when he is resting in the his home. Then that time usually this symptom become more evident, and this symptom usually relieved on moving the legs or massaging or just moving here and there. If the person will actually keep on moving his legs, the symptom will actually disappear, or we can say the symptom will not be felt. But again, when the patient will stay calm and sit at a place, or he take a rest of his leg, then again the symptom will appear. So this syndrome is known as restless leg syndrome. That if you will take the rest, then you will have the syndrome, and if you will keep moving, keep massaging the legs, then the symptom will be relieved. But you should know one thing, that initially the sensory symptoms are there, and later, if the sensory symptoms are not cured, if they are not cured, then only the motor symptom appears, and the motor symptoms are basically the weakness in the legs. So there will be weakness in leg. So this leg or any or arms or body muscle or any body muscle. Whenever the sensory symptom come, you should always go for the dialysis. So dialysis is the mainstay of treatment in this condition when the sensory symptoms start to appear. And if you will not correct it by dialysis, then the motor symptom follows, including the muscle weakness. So now, in chronic kidney disease, a very important syndrome or very important actually event happen, that is known as uremia. So uremia is, so many students are in confusion that the uremia is basically due to the accumulation of serum urea and creatinine, but that is not true actually. Not only serum urea and creatinine lead to the sign and symptom of uremic syndrome, but there are hundred of toxin. They are guanidino, hippurates, product of nucleic acid, polyamines, ionocytol, phenol, indole, etc. And there are many of the toxins. They all together with the urea and creatinine contribute to the uremic syndrome and uremic symptoms. So they are basically seen in the very later stages, that is stage 4 and stage 5. Usually they are evident at the stage 5. Now let's see what are the manifestation that is due to the uremia. So uremia is nothing but the accumulation of the these all 100 or more than 100 toxins in the blood due to the decreased GFR, due to the decreased excretory function of the kidney. So let's start to discuss about the symptoms of uremia. So first of all, the person, in this picture you can see there are two persons. So let's suppose this is a person A and this is the person B. So the person B is speaking, and after he speaks, the person A get angry. Why is it so? Is it so because the person B is speaking and from his mouth a very odor, a bad breath, or you can say the bad breath come out, and due to this bad breath he get angry. The A gets angry. A for angry. Now why there is a bad odor or bad breath by the person B? So the reason is that this person has actually the urea in his breath. The person has a urea in his breath, but when this urea actually comes in the mouth, the saliva mixes with urea. So this urea mixed with saliva, and after mixing with the saliva, the urea break and it will release the ammonia. NH3. And this ammonia is actually having the bad odor breath. So this happens with this person. So the uremic person will have the bad odor breath. It is basically due to the urea. When mixing with saliva, it produces ammonia, and ammonia is having a bad odor. Another thing, the person himself, this person B himself have a metallic taste in his mouth. So urea when get mixed with the saliva ultimately form the ammonia and will have a metallic taste in mouth. And you can ask me that why there is a urea in the breath. The reason is actually there is so much amount of urea in the blood, and from the blood it can come to the oral cavity or the nasal cavity, and that's why the urea is present in his breath. Now let us suppose that the urea present in the blood came to the GI tract, and when the urea comes in the GI tract, it irritated the mucosa. Of the stomach, and due to the irritation of the mucosa in the stomach, it can promote either the reverse peristalsis, and when the reverse peristalsis is promoted, the gastric contents can come out via mouth, so it can cause the vomiting, and the it may cause the not reverse, that is a normal peristalsis, but in vigorous condition, and may lead to the diarrhea. So the uremia can cause the vomiting as well as the diarrhea. And you should know one thing, that as there is so much amount of urea in the blood, it can actually stimulate the chemo trigger zone. So chemo trigger zone is basically a zone in the brain stem. It is a zone in the brain stem, that is, let's suppose this is a so this is a brain stem. So there is a chemo trigger zone, and when this zone is irritated by the urea, it can lead again to the vomiting and anorexia. So vomiting, anorexia, nausea, these all can be due to the urea. And you can easily see that it is irritating the mucosa. The urea is irritating the mucosa, and that's why it can also cause the abdominal pain, and sometimes it may promote the gastrointestinal bleeding. So the GI bleeding also can occur. So you can easily see that the uremia can cause a number of gastric disorders like the nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, GI bleeding, and it can stimulate the chemo trigger zone and may cause again vomiting, anorexia, nausea. Uremia in GI tract can also lead to the gastritis and may cause the peptic ulcer disease. As you should know that the urea will cause the more HCl production. So there is more HCl production when there is a presence of urea in the blood, and when there is a more HCl production, it can cause the gastritis, it can cause the peptic ulcer disease. So a number of the gastrointestinal manifestation can occur in case of the uremia. You should know one thing in mind, that usually the metabolic acidosis and a generalized inflammation. You know that in the CKD there is a metabolic acidosis and generalized inflammation state in the body, and this both will actually cause the protein catabolism. Protein catabolism means protein destruction, and due to which there is a more urea is formed. So by correcting the metabolic acidosis and the generalized inflammation state, you can somehow correct the uremia, or you can actually decrease the severity of the uremia. So one of the treatment to decrease the uremia is basically treat the metabolic acidosis if present. Okay. Now let's talk about the dermatological finding. So in dermatological finding, it is also occur in the very late stages. So basically, due to the uremia, there is a generalized pruritus in the body. So pruritus means the itching, and though the patient will be on dialysis, but the patient may have the pigment deposition in his skin, and will be known as urochromes. So the picture will be like this. I have shown in this figure. So let's see, you can see the white type of patches in the skin. So these white patches are basically the urochromes. So these two things are somehow common in the patients of the CKD. We all know one thing, that the protein is basically breakdown. When we eat protein, the protein is breakdown in the body to form the amino acids, and the amino acids basically form the urea. So ultimately the byproduct of the protein is in the body is urea, and urea should be excreted. But this urea if it is not excreting from the body due to the reduced GFR, then it may lead to the uremia. So if we have to treat a person, we can tell him that you should take low protein diet, You should take low protein diet. But yes, you should know one thing more, that if he takes low protein diet, it can lead him to the malnutrition. It can also lead him to the malnutrition. So this is a very controversial thing, that if you will take high protein diet, then you will have the uremia like symptoms, and if you will take the low protein diet, you will be suffered from the malnutrition. So what amount of protein should be taken, that is actually prescribed by either doctors, or nowadays especially the dietitian. So the dietitian and doctors are especially prescribing that what amount of protein should the patient take, so that there cannot be the more uremia also, and there will not be the malnutrition also. Now let's see that the glucose metabolism is basically impaired in the patients of CKD, as the patients of CKD in the very later stages are resistant to the anabolic action of insulin and other growth hormones. So the CKD patients are basically resistant to the action of insulin. As we know, the insulin action is to decrease the blood glucose level by getting the glucose into the muscle, but the glucose level in the ball of blood declines slowly in such person, I mean in CKD person, after intake of food, as there is a resistance to the insulin, as there is insulin resistance, and due to which there is a mild glucose intolerance. It means the patient blood glucose level will be high, but that will not be too much high, and that require treatment. So it hardly require any treatment, but you should know one thing, that the glucose level is high. Now you should know one more thing, that let's suppose if any person is diabetic and he is taking the metformin, and let's suppose he is having CKD also, then the dose of metformin, what kind of dose of metformin should he take? So you should know one thing, that in CKD patients, what happen, the insulin is not degraded, or we can say the not excreted much. In CKD patient, the insulin is not degraded or secreted much. That's why the insulin level are usually high. And due to which, if he take the metformin in a very normal amount, that the normal diabetic person take, then the insulin release will be so much high that it will cause the hypoglycemia. So that's why, to prevent that thing, the metformin dose or any dose of the hypoglycemic agent should be reduced. So usually the dose is reduced to half than normal diabetic person. So the main thing to understand, that in the patients of CKD, we will not give the exact amount of the anti-diabetic drugs that we will give in the diabetes person. If the person is having CKD, we will actually reduce the dose to the half than the normal, as the insulin level is already high in the patient of CKD, as the insulin are not degraded or not excreted much. But you should know in one thing, that though the insulin is high, the insulin is somehow resistant in the patient of CKD, and that's why there can be the mild glucose intolerance. But yes, this glucose intolerance hardly requires any kind of treatment. Let's talk about the clinical features. So I have discussed all clinical features separately, but also I am just making a summary of the clinical features, that the most of the patient will remain asymptomatic until the GFR fall below 30 ml per minute per 1.73 meter square of body surface area. And usually the earliest symptom is nocturia, that in the night time the patient will have the more frequent urination, and that will be bothering to the patient. And whenever the GFR fall below 15, uremic manifestation begin. But yes, there are some manifestation due to uremia that can also be seen in the earlier stages that we have already discussed. And usually the immunity is lowered in the CKD, and due to the lower of immunity, due to the lowering of the decreased cellular as well as the humoral immunity, the patient will be more prone to the infection. and in that case pneumonia, sepsis can occur. As we know that the uremia is also related to the function of platelets. So the uremia, high level of urea, will cause the disturbance in the function of platelet, and due to the platelet disturbance there will be bleeding tendency. We have already discussed. There will be another thing, that is a small breathing, that is due to the metabolic acidosis. Since the metabolic acidosis is actually compensated by the respiratory alkalosis, so the metabolic acidosis will be compensated by the respiratory alkalosis. Sorry, this marker is not working. Respiratory alkalosis, and due to which there will be the abnormal breathing patterns known as Kussmaul breathing, which simply means there will be fast breathing. There can be the manifestation of anemia. As we know, there are different cause of anemia in case of the CKD that you can see here, and now this anemia will result in the shortness of breath, easy fatigability, like that condition. Another abnormalities, endocrine abnormalities. As we know that in the CKD, actually whatever the hormones that is actually metabolized by the kidney, the metabolism of all those hormones will get decreased, and due to which the level of all those hormones will increase in the blood. So that's why the level of prolactin will also increase in the blood, and this high level of prolactin will cause the loss of libido. So it will cause the loss of libido in both male as well as in female. Another thing, that insulin is also actually metabolized in the kidney, but in the person of the CKD, as the kidney is somehow not working properly, that's why the insulin metabolism is impaired, and therefore if any person is taking the insulin, he should take the low dose of insulin. Okay, so the dose should be managed by the doctors, not yourself. So these were the clinical features. There will be the generalized myopathy, that is the all the muscles in the body are actually destroyed, or we can say all the muscles are slowly damaged. So the reason is that the muscles are slowly being damaged, and the new muscles is not forming. That's why the person will become lean and thin, or we can say the muscular mass will become less. So there will be low muscle index. So the muscular index will very low or decrease, and this actually generalized myopathy, that is the pathology in the muscle, is basically due to the poor nutrition. So the poor nutrition in CKD occurs as in CKD there is decreased appetite, and another thing, the protein intake is somehow lower due to the disease process. So the protein intake is lower, and that's why also there will be low muscle index. Another thing, there is a hyperparathyroidism, there is a vitamin D deficiency, and there is electrolyte imbalance. These all also contribute to the generalized myopathy condition, and the patient will tell you often the symptom for the muscle cramps. So there will be muscle cramps that the patient will tell you on the symptom. The bones are also fragile and prone to fracture, and the patient of CKD are also prone to cardiovascular disease. I have already said you all the causes of the cardiovascular disease, that why the cardiovascular disease actually occur in case of the CKD, and this was all the clinical feature that we should know. So what are the tests that lab tests that we should do in case of the CKD? So first of all, the main test that we will do is urea and creatinine. So the level of urea and creatinine will help us to assess the disease progression and monitor that the disease is the condition of disease is worsening, or it is like the previous. So that kind of the monitoring of the disease is actually helped by urea and creatinine. Another thing, urine analysis. So we will analyze the urine to assess the presence of RBC or the protein in the urine, and that is we call that the hematuria or proteinuria. Basically the hematuria and the proteinuria. So the presence of the proteinuria indicates that the disease is progressing, and it also says that if the proteinuria is present, then we have to use the ACE inhibitors or angiotensin receptor blocker drugs to prevent it. Another thing, electrolytes. So we actually identify the electrolytes like the potassium, the sodium. So the electrolytes like the potassium, the sodium, and the very famous bicarbonates. So these electrolytes are basically seen in order to evaluate the hyperkalemia is present or not, metabolic acid, to rule out the metabolic acidosis. So that's why we will do these electrolytes. Another thing is calcium phosphate, parathyroid hormone, vitamin D. So these are done to access the renal osteodystrophy. So to access the renal osteodystrophy, this test is done. And the thing is albumin. So low albumin, consider the malnutrition, and you will also do the complete blood count. So in complete blood count, you can first of all see the level of hemoglobin to actually rule out the anemia, and you can also know anemia by just looking the person. Also that the in CBC, by looking the blood white blood cell count, we can rule out the inflammatory causes. And we will also check for the lipids, glucose, and HbA1c value. So they will help us to access the cardiovascular risks. So what are the other tests that we can do for the CKD? So they are the renal ultrasonography. So that is done to rule out renal artery stenosis, to see whether the size of the kidney. So if the kidney size is small, then it suggests the chronicity of the disease, and we will see that the kidney is symmetrical or not. And we will also actually, if we plan for the dialysis or transplantation, then before that we will see the hepatitis B, HIV. We will also see for the syphilis, cytomegalovirus. So we can add the CMV, the syphilis. So we can add this thing, so that will help for the dialysis. And we will also see the ECG. So ECG is done basically to see the cardiac manifestation of the CKD, and it is also useful to see the pericarditis. So as we know that uremic pericarditis happen. And we will also do the chest X-ray. Chest X-ray will we will see the pulmonary edema is present or not, if there is any evidence of the cardiac failure is present or not, or if there is any presence of the pericarditis or cardiac tamponade. And we will also measure the GFR to calculate the and grade to stage the disease.